Okay, we have some presentations today, but first a couple of brief announcements. For everyone listening and in the room, if you notice a street light out in your area and it's attached to a telephone pole, there is a new form on the Orangetown website under the How Do I section to report that street light out. You can submit it with a nearest address, preferably with a telephone pole number on it, and then we'll get someone out to fix it. Any lights that are on metal poles still belong to O&R, so you would go through O&R for that, but this is a new form for replacing broken LED street lights that we took over the course of this year, or course of last year, sorry. Next, we have a town board, a public hearing regarding Galway Bay's revision of their original petition, scheduled for the next meeting, December 17th at 7:45. Then a public hearing regarding approval of the map of the Pearl River Fire District at the same date at 8 p.m. And a continuation, at this moment at least, for the Beaver zone change on December 17th.
I was told they're pulling it.
I was told they haven't formally pulled it yet, so it's still on the calendar.
Okay.
All right. We have a few presentations. We're going to go a little out of order, but we'll start off with, Dennis, you want to start with with John Murphy's for Siobhan, or do you want to start with the Coco? Or Councilman Troy is going to take lead on these because he's more familiar.
In the month of November, we had the Veterans Day, and there was a big weekend, the Veterans Weekend, and a lot of different events went on in the town. And whether at the American Legions, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Walkway of Heroes. But one of the other things that was done during that period of time were fundraisers for Homes for Heroes. And I'm going to talk a second about Homes for Heroes. Homes for Heroes is on Western Highway. It was federal land. It was first going up for sale by the federal government. And John Murphy, legislator John Murphy, ended up putting in a bid on the land. And it was controversial at the time. There were some people saying, why are you doing this? You know, why don't you just let it go out to bid? One of the things with the federal statute was it had to be for homeless. And one of the things I commend John on doing was by John putting in the bid, you know, through his organizations, it really maintained control in the town what would go there. And what has really turned out, I've gone to a whole bunch of ceremonies there, the ribbon cuttings, is a home right now for 8 homeless veterans. And there's going to be, I believe, 14 or 12, 14, you know, more that are going in there. One of the other things that's been done in that property is through Jimmy Dean in the highway department. Town took over part of the property. It's for drainage to help with the flooding down in the Spark Hill Creek. It's been a real asset to the town. And I go back to, John took a lot of heat in the beginning on that, but he stayed the course. He has his Marine hat on, true Marine, and a lot of other members of the community have really taken part and try to help out with the Homes for Heroes. So have John get up and talk about what happened on Veterans Weekend.
First of all, thank you for inviting me here. And I wear my Marine hat so nobody knows I'm bald. That's very important. Our home, Rockland Homes for Heroes, sits on Camp Shanks, where 1.3 million GIs left America to fight the Nazis. And after that, it was the home of a Nike missile program that protected New York City. And then after that, the commander of a battalion of the Army Engineers, and he is the former Deputy Commissioner of Sewers in the county, and he's here tonight. Where are you? Where are you, Russ? Stand up. Al Rossi, I'm talking about you. Al Rossi not only commanded that unit, but he was in Desert Storm, and he received the awards for putting out the oil fires. Give him a round of applause. He's a hero. Now, when the federal government put up the land, it had to be used for serving the homeless, but it was federal land, and anybody who wanted to serve the homeless could have built 60 stories from curb to curb. Since it was our community, I thought we would take it and not overdevelop it, and we would make it a living memorial to all the people who left there and never came home. And we're so pleased that this community, and I'm going to speak about them quickly right now, the Orange and Rockland employees received the use of the Rockland GAA fields for free. And they gathered an army of volunteers, and they produced a contribution of over $16,000 for Rockland Homes for Heroes, and they're in the audience right now. Did you want to bring them up?
Yeah, I've got certificates, I believe.
Yeah, I have all the certificates. If you want to do one by one, whatever.
Well, they don't want to be seen next to the children because, you know, you never have performed with an act with a dog or children. W.C. Fields said that. Anybody here old enough to remember that? You're very old, yeah. Siobhan, you want to come forward, please, with your friends? She has the names. She's going to read the names.
So Owen and I, we're actually in storm mode right now, so a lot of the volunteers are on storm duty, but we have Nicole Glennon here.
First, we're going to welcome Siobhan
Oh,
to from O&R.
Thank you. Thank you. So two volunteers who are core at bringing the fundraiser together was David Reevy and Nicole Glennon, and the rest are all on storm duty, unfortunately.
We have one certificate for you.
Thank you.
But it's for all of you.
Okay,
All
thank
right?
you so much. Thank you.
Siobhan, thank you for everything.
Thanks.
It should be known that the employees of Orange and Rockland and their friends raised the biggest contribution we've ever received for Rockland Homes for Heroes. And they did it without asking us to lift a finger. They did it all on their own, and it was wonderful. It really was wonderful. So tonight, when you can't get your power back, forgive them, okay? You want to go back to the...
No, stay there. All right. Sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's about, again, the variety of people and groups that end up supporting any charitable organization. And this first group is from Girl Scouts from down in Nyack. All right, you have Kathleen Meyer come up here. Yeah, have that, and then we have her group. No.
For those of you who don't know, the lady coming up is Dennis's daughter. Okay, right here. It's Dennis's daughter. Neither one of them will admit to being related, but they're father and daughter right here. And a lot of these belong to you, right?
This is a, right.
Come on, stand over here. All right, you stand in front. That's it.
All right, Kathleen? This is for Ella Anderton. Take that one. Julia Anderton. Ivy Castrello. Ariello Khan. Riley Meyer. This, by the way, is my granddaughter. And I just mention one thing. This is, there's a senator from New York that, from my side of the aisle, I'm not a big fan of. But because of that senator, Senator Charles Schumer, Riley ended up coming here from Korea. And Riley is my granddaughter. I'm very proud of her. Where's Sarah? Another granddaughter hiding out. Sarah Meyer. Delilah Tim and Lulu, Tim. Where's Delilah, Tim? Right there. Congratulations. This is for your sister, Lulu. And one of my wife's cousins, Grace Vanderloo. Hi, Grace. Her brother, Owen Vanderloo. And Ivy Walsh. And Kathleen, that's yours. Thank you very much. All right.
And you had to know that they sold the hot cocoa in freezing weather. Most of them with very little, I stood in a heated car and watched, by the way. But they stood out there in the cold and they sold hot cocoa, and I think they got a message to the community. If they were willing to do something for our veterans, we should all do something for our veterans. Okay, go now, go.
Kathleen, Piedmont. The Piedmont group? Send them out. All right, the next group is from Piedmont, who did the same thing for Homes for Heroes. John? You know this? I don't. Heidi Collier?
Yes, is Heidi here? Yeah, they're coming up, sure.
Okay, give that one. Heidi?
This is, yeah, you're the only one that you're representing the whole Piedmont crowd?
Here, take that.
Okay, I gotta tell you, you're very, very pretty. You think I'm handsome? I knew that was the right question. I want to thank you because you sit out there and hold on the porch of the Friends Apartment, and they stood out in the cold and they raised quite a bit of money for this trip. So thank you very much, and thank you very
And
much
here's-
for allowing it to happen.
All right, John, also Alana Verlick and Katie Verlick. And thank you. This next group is from Tapan, and they really started this several years ago. And again, they're relations of mine.
This is Dennis's daughter-in-law, and this is his granddaughter who we're moving to. That's his son. Oh, that's a grandson. We're moving to be the next town supervisor. Okay, and this over here, come on, you could be county executive.
He's showing good sense, John. All right. Our first guy is Artie Garcia. How you doing, Artie? Artie, put it there, babe. Liliana Garcia. Alex Malley. Brendan Troy. Karen Troy. Can Karen read? No. Maddie Troy. Allie Wakus. Cassie Wakus. And young Braden. I owe you one, Braden. All right. Again, John, congratulations.
First of all, I want to thank the town board for allocating this time, but I thought it was important that the people of this town know what wonderful, wonderful children we have that are willing to come out on the coldest days of the year and sell hot cocoa. And I think it sets an example for every parent and every family that they're doing something for God Bless America veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for your volunteer work.
Aren't you glad I'm no longer a legislator? You don't have to listen to these people?
Okay, so I did mention going a little out of order. If the the folks from Orangeburg Commons don't mind, we're gonna put the library consolidation efficiency study next because I think more people are here for that, no offense, but, so if the folks from Orangeburg, Tapan, and Palisades libraries wanna come up to the podium, and just for background, basically, these three libraries, which are currently 3 of the 4 libraries that are funded directly by the town of Orangetown, whereas Pearl River and Piermont are, and Nyack, I believe, are funded by direct taxation of residents, just like most libraries in the county. They took a look at what money they could save by consolidating and becoming their own special district, which would replicate similarly to what a Pearl River School District library is, Pearl River Library is, sorry, just be a slightly different geographic area. So they did a study with Patterns of Progress, and former Supervisor Andy Stewart is here. I welcome him. And they're going to share the results and talk about it a little bit, and hopefully it's beneficial to the town.
Hello, thank you for having us here. I'm Marjorie Galen. I'm with the Palisades Library Board, and
Vicki Caramonte, Tapan Library.
Orangetown, Orangeburg Library.
and you did my introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Several months ago, representatives of the Orangeburg, Palisades, and
Yeah,
Tapan libraries appeared before you to present a proposal to conduct an independent cost-benefit study of a unification of the 3 libraries. With a financial contribution from the town, the libraries engaged Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress to conduct the study. Recently completed, the study was presented to and reviewed by each of the library's boards of trustees. It concluded that a unified district would reduce costs, improve services, and stabilize finances. After careful consideration of the results, which will be presented to you in a few moments, each board voted in favor of moving the consolidation, to the next step, to seek your feedback and to pursue authorizing legislation from the town board and the New York State Legislature. So now, Andy Stewart from Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress will tell us what he's done.
All right, let's see if we can get this thing headed the right way here. All right. Hold on. Is that working? Let's see if we've got forward and backwards. All right. First of all, thank you. Once again, my name's Andy Stewart, and it's been a great privilege to work with the libraries to put some of the details into what is a very simple concept, which is you have 3 districts, which essentially do exactly the same thing with the exact same. Dennis, I didn't get a chance to say hello before, but nice to see you. Same functions, same tools, very distinct architectures and histories, and of course, distinct neighborhoods, but overall, similar operations. And they share a good portion of their user base. And so the question comes up, maybe they should actually share administrative, technological, purchasing, and other kinds of mechanisms and operate as a single organization with 3 branches. And so that was the scope of the study, was to investigate the details of what that unification, what the impacts of that might be. The upshot of it is, and it shouldn't be any great surprise to anybody, that it would save money. And it would also enable the coordination of services in a way that's impossible with 3 independent organizations, albeit ones which do cooperate on various levels. And we all know that you can take a library out of one, take a book out of one library, bring it back to the other. There's a lot of cooperation, but the level of unity you can get with one organization administratively and with personnel and the technology and the purchasing and so on is in a different class. So after going through budget and personnel and a number of different sources of data, was my recommendation and that of our group that the libraries should proceed. And just to clarify, what they are going to be trying to do, what they have voted to do, is to petition the state of New York for an opportunity for the residents of their library districts to vote on whether or not to unify the 3 libraries into one. And so that's the petition process. It's not something that the libraries can do by themselves. They've just begun a process that requires the authorization, action by the town board, action by state agencies that regulate libraries, ultimately the passage of legislation that would enable a vote, and of course, then it'll be up to the residents of those districts to either support or not the unification. The information I'm going to give you is pulled from the report that you all have, and of course, there's a lot more detail in the report. So what I want to show you in these slides is just some highlights of that information. And one of the things that we can see is just the sheer amount of activity that takes place within libraries. 118,000 plus visits, circulation, and so on. And besides the small print here, which nobody has time to read right now, one of the things that we find when we look at libraries is there's a lot of data. They're operational data because they have electronic tracking of the coming and going of their materials. They have a lot of information about how to manage their resources. They're very good at it. And the combination of the districts into one would enable them to do that even better. One of the important facts that we discovered in looking at the services libraries provide, and this is just for the 3 that we're looking at, it doesn't include the others, is that 17% roughly on average is the amount of library activity which takes place via a library patron from one using the other. In other words, the take-home point here is that the libraries already operate to a substantial degree as a single organization. They're used that way by patrons, but their organization as separate entities prevents them from taking full advantage of that fact. It's no secret to anybody, certainly on this town board, because annually we struggle with library budget, that the libraries are suffering from declining reserve funds, and their finances are a tricky proposition. It depends on the case of the library. Some have a little more, some less. But there's definitely a financial horizon which is rapidly approaching where they'll need to rethink how they provide their services. So just to step back for a minute and just to remind ourselves, the overall unification impacts, the value proposition there is essentially the separation of the funding mechanism out as a public referendum item where the people of those districts get to vote on their library budget. And that's the way most libraries are funded. It's unique somewhat that the libraries that we're talking about are funded through contracts with the town. The preservation of the facilities and the economies of scale, which are numerous and really too many to go into in detail, but just think about one board of trustees, one director, one website, one newsletter, one payroll system, one CPA, and so on and so forth. It's a simple proposition on the face of it, but we actually got down and counted them and tried to quantify what that impact would be. And we came up with a conservative estimate of 5 to 6% savings. These are not big budgets, so every dollar counts. There's a little bit of information about taxation here. Right now, each of the districts has a slightly different rate. If they're all one, everybody would pay the same rate. Instead of having the funding coming in most part from a town contract and then secondarily from a school district tax, it would all just be in one tax levy from the unified district. And again, it's important to remind ourselves, because I think libraries are it's so easy to go from library to library. People often forget that each library is independently funded by the people in that district. And it doesn't affect the people who live outside those districts in the town if they join together or not financially. But to the extent that everybody in the town may use the services from all these libraries, they might benefit from the enhanced coordination of the services. These are just some areas of savings, from books and videos to program costs to the cost of having equipment, software licenses, operating expenses. Like any organization, libraries purchase contractual services from other entities, and so those contracts in many cases can be combined for a savings. Something as simple as snow plowing or landscaping contract, or as complex as IT services. So we went through each of the areas of spending and looked to see how we might manage those costs differently if it were a unified district. And again, on the revenue side, the only thing that's important about this is that instead of having two tax levies, one by the school, one by the, and one town contracts that result in levies on those districts, there would just be one. And that does simplify the picture. I think for taxpayers, they have a little easier time understanding what's going on their tax bill that way. These are some examples of the kinds of spending that would be subject to consolidation, where the purchasing would be in a slightly greater volume, generally getting a better price. And it just runs the gamut. You know, most of us, we walk through the library door, we get what we need, we leave, and we don't stop to think that they all have to have a HVAC system monitoring and maintenance contract. You know, they all have to have copiers with leases. You know, they all have to have payroll processing and so on and so forth. These are things that make the libraries work. They cost money, and they can do better as a unified district. On staffing, we're not imagining a dramatic change, but there are a couple of positions which have been held vacant in anticipation of this policy question being resolved. And so the consolidation would result in a reduction in overall full-time equivalent staffing over time, you know, starting with a couple of vacant positions that exist, but then if you model it out, somewhat of a decrease over time. And again, just to reiterate, the funding mechanism, instead of a town contract, would be a public vote on a budget that would be proposed by a single group of trustees overseeing 3 branches of 1 district. And this slide simply addresses some of the service improvements. Our main scope of the study was to identify savings from expense reductions. But one of the things that comes out is all the ways in which a unified system can do just a little bit better when it's taking care of its patrons. Whether that's a single point of entry for, say, reserving a community room, which is one of the things the libraries do. Instead of having to shop from 3 different districts, you can call one number and find out what might be available. Having lending rules all consistent from branch to branch, so that the time limit on taking a video out or having some other kind of access is the same everywhere, and just less confusion. But at the end of the day, it's about economies of scale. So when we look at what unification might look like, this is a little bit of a chart. It's hard to see probably from this distance, but the X's fall on months going through 2020 into 2021, and the key steps are listed there. And you can consult your printed version of the report for the details. But essentially, we're at the beginning, which is that the trustees have decided to pursue unification, and that journey takes them to the town board, ultimately to the state, and after that, ultimately to a referendum if they're allowed to have one. Were that to take place and it were successful, they would, sort of take care of an administrative process to actually combine their assets and unify their management. And that's where we're at. I wanted to mention one item which comes up. Sometimes people worry that one of the things that would happen as far as personnel goes is that putting everybody on the same plan would involve all the employees being within the state civil service system. And that comes with rules and regulations which can be cumbersome in some respects. One of the things that it's important that folks understand is that civil service, it sets job titles and job descriptions. It doesn't set salaries, and it doesn't equate to being unionized or having a union contract. And so the libraries feel that they've been successful in one case anyway, using the civil service system. It's common in other library districts, and that the civil service system would not deprive them of the autonomy of being able to set their salaries as they desire, and as the market allows them to do. So that's the summary of our study. I wanted to note also, I should have said this in the beginning, as a former town supervisor, it gives me great pleasure to be here. I'm also, I spoke with the town attorney about this. There's a blackout period for representing to the town board on issues. It applies for the 2 years after you left office. In this case, because this policy issue was never a part of my work portfolio while I was town supervisor, and we're about 3 weeks out from the end of that period, I think we all felt comfortable that I could make this presentation on behalf of the libraries and then invite the libraries back up to close out and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
All right, I hope that's sufficient. Not too much detail, but enough to let people know in simple terms kind of what the proposal looks like.
Yep. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it.
So questions or answers, however you want to handle it.
So just to summarize, there is identified cost savings. It would require being civil service. However, most other libraries are civil service, as is the town. It would come off of our budget, become its own taxing entity with a tax cap. But this is all, the next step would be us being involved in the home rule legislation passing sometime in maybe January. But then this, if it then passes in that legislative session up in Albany, then it just goes to vote of the residents of the districts involved to determine whether it happens. So at no point is the school, or the libraries, or the town making this decision. We're making it possible. Would that be a safe summary?
It's, each one has a role to play, but at the end of the day, it's a vote by just the residents of those 3 districts.
When does that vote take place? Does it take place, is it its own vote, or does it take place?
The home rule legislation would define that vote, and I don't know, it might or might not be on the same day as other votes or elections. And it would be for the purposes of establishing a new district, establishing its budget for the next year, and establishing the trustees who would be managing. And so it would be 3 pieces to that referendum. And if it passed, then they would have, the time, it would take effect on January 1st of the following year, presumably, and they would have some time to get their duckies in order so that they're ready to manage themselves as one district.
You have any questions, gentlemen?
So I just got one question.
Yep.
So you're having this vote, so you're voting, so people would have to put themselves out to be trustees as part of that vote, because you're putting forth a slate of people who want to be trustees for this unified school board, library board?
At the same time, everyone?
Who decided to run would run.
All right, so it's not only approving it, but it's approving who's going to get elected to those positions. All right.
Yep, it's election of trustees, setting the budget, and
All in one shot?
authorizing the new district.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the specifics of that would be defined in the home rule legislation itself. So very specific things like how trustees are elected, the formation of the new district. And that's why the home rule legislation actually takes a fair amount of work. And the libraries are going to have to work with attorneys to craft that, have it, obviously share that with the town. But it has fairly specific information in it about what the new district would look like.
Follow-up question. Is there going to be a certain number of trustees coming from each current library board, or have you guys discussed that yet, or how is it going to go?
Yes, 2 from each, and then 1 additional from Spark Hill. Or is it Spark Hill or just Spark
Be
Hill?
Spark- Yeah, it's designed to be representative of the current
Okay.
districts.
All right.
So, I think generally speaking, we participated in the study. The board is still supportive of the concept in terms of allowing it to go forward, so we would encourage you to proceed forward with the home rule writing of the legislation, and then, I guess, link in with, at the time, Supervisor Kenny's office, and in January, and hopefully move forward for this legislative session in Albany.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Andy. All right. Okay. We have one more presentation. It's a presentation-heavy agenda tonight. Orangeburg Commons is a petition for a zone change. Want to step up as we
if
switch
that's the
off
right one.
presentations on the computer here.
Matt here somewhere?
So, as this is getting set up, basically, Orangeburg Commons has come in for a petition. This is their presentation on the petition. There are no resolutions on the agenda tonight with regard to it. If there's a sense that we want to move forward, at least to having a public hearing set, we'll then schedule that at the next meeting for a subsequent date to be determined.
There you go.
Thanks very much. Good evening. Geraldine Tortorella of Hockerman, Tortorella, and Wexstein. We're counsel for the owner of the shopping center, FB Orangetown. We're here this evening. Our office is in White Plains. I have a few other people here with me this evening as well to answer some questions and make a short presentation. I have John Stebbins, who is with XSS Hotels. XSS has worked with the owner of the shopping center for the development of the existing residence inn and would be working in connection with this proposal that we have this evening to develop the second hotel on the property. Also here is Jillian Alps. She is the manager of the Residence Inn, so you may know her from seeing her around town. And Al Rossi is here this evening on behalf of the applicant and the shopping center owner, not here to put out any fires, I hope. Our proposal this evening is, if you remember, originally our project received approval for a combination of uses. This is a mixed-use development. The combination of uses were to be 2 hotels, originally retail, a bank, and some other personal service uses. We subsequently came in and obtained approval to have the Stop and Shop supermarket be substituted for a considerable amount of the retail on the property. And so now our approvals are for 2 hotels, the Stop and Shop, which has been constructed, also a restaurant and a bank pad on the property. We're here this evening because this board has been very interested and committed and has made its wishes known that it would like to see the second hotel built on the site. The Residence Inn was built as part of the first phase when Stop and Shop was constructed, but nothing else has been built on the site, and we have been working for a number of years now trying to find the right complement of uses that will work on the site. Last year or earlier this year, we actually thought that we would be able to develop a Fairfield Inn hotel as a separate freestanding hotel. We went through the exercise of getting approval for that from the planning board. But before we could get to construction, Marriott, which is the brand owner, indicated to us that they would not be willing to back 2 hotels, 2 independent freestanding hotels on the property. And in fact, they've been working with a new product called a dual brand hotel, which they've built in a number of different locations. And they wanted to bring one to Rockland County, and they want to build it on this site. And so that's what we're here this evening to discuss with you. We're looking for a zoning amendment that would allow us to develop the dual brand hotel on the property. What would happen here is that this is the existing Residence Inn. The second hotel was in this general vicinity here. Instead of building the second the second freestanding building, the second hotel would be built in an addition in this general vicinity here. So this is the site plan that we would be pursuing approval for if we were to obtain the zoning amendment. And what will really happen here, and you'll hear shortly a little bit about what the dual brand concept is, but what will happen here is that we will take the existing Residence Inn and the Fairfield Inn and in essence merge the 2 to have common shared administrative services. And then different hotel spaces or keys, rooms. Some would be Residence Inn constructed and formatted, and the other would be Fairfield Inn format. We have here, just to remind you, this is the bank pad and the restaurant pad, and this is the Stop and Shop supermarket.
2 questions, sorry. Where, the daycare that was approved, that pad, where is that on this site?
So
That's that
this
right there,
space
right?
right here
Okay.
is what we call the shops at Orangeburg Commons. It was originally approved for retail, And we came in, and with your board's cooperation, we obtained a zoning amendment to allow daycare. That was approved by the planning board on this location. That is still a viable project. We have not pursued construction because there is work on refining the design and looking at some modifications to the design of that building, including the interior of the building. We obtained planning board approval for the daycare center. We obtained ACABOR approval for the signs because the signs changed as going from the retail to the daycare. But then we had the issue develop with wanting to look at some modifications of the design. And instead of going back and getting the final approval, final site plan approval, we thought it made sense to go back in and get final site plan approval for the actual building as it will be actually constructed. So that has been pending for, it was actually approved back in late 2018.
Yeah. And the other question is, I mean, I'm sure there's a very easy answer to this, but why do we need to modify the zoning if you're putting in, I mean, it's still kind of a second hotel, right? Is it more of a bulk requirement thing? Why would we be
It's a
involved
math.
with that?
It's a mathematical calculation.
Okay.
The reason is because in your code, in this mixed-use district, you wanted to make sure that you didn't have an excessive amount of retail and restaurant and personal service uses. You wanted to have a nice complement of uses that would have a good synergy. So the zoning ordinance has a limitation on the percentage of gross floor area that can be devoted to retail, restaurant, or personal service. When we combine the two hotels, there will be a smaller footprint and a smaller gross floor area. And that affects the calculation of the amount of gross floor area devoted to retail, restaurant, and personal service as compared to the overall gross floor area.
So the ratio changes.
The
because
ratio
it's less
changes.
square footage of hotel space. It's the ratio versus retail is different, and therefore you have to adjust the zone for that.
That,
You're gonna wanna increase the size of the restaurant or the size of?
no,
size of the
and
bank?
no, and in fact, we're not seeking any modification of the restaurant, of the Stop and Shop, or of the bank pads.
It's just the hotel space as compared to those things, essentially, is what needs to be changed.
That's exactly correct. And so what happened was, if we were to build what was approved, we'd be somewhere between 28 and 29% retail, restaurant, personal service. Because of the reduction in the overall gross floor area of the hotels, two freestanding versus one combined, one building combined, we're actually at just under 35%. So our request is to change the 30% to 35% to accommodate the dual brand hotel. We are not, again, proposing any changes to the restaurant or to the bank or to the Stop and Shop.
Okay.
So it's a mathematical calculation, but it's in your code, it's a statutory provision. And so that's what brings us back here to seek the amendment. If you grant the amendment, we need to amend the special permit because it is based on your approval. The special permit is based on a concept plan, which will be changing with the combination of the two hotels into one building. And also the ratio or the percentage will be changing. So under your code, we'd need from you an approval of the amended special use permit. I have not yet applied for that, although with prior applications, we did combine the zoning amendment with an application for the amendment for the special use permit. At our own risk, if you will, if you didn't approve the amendment, then I would have done the work to make the application, but obviously wouldn't be getting an approval for the amendment of the special use permit. It just led to efficiency. We'd like to be able to do that, but we thought we should come before the board this evening and make an initial presentation on what the zoning amendment would involve. I did ask Mr. Stebbins to come this evening on behalf of the dual brand hotel and our developer, because even though that's not specifically what's before you, I thought it was important for the board to understand what this would look like, what this means, what this involves, what benefits are there to the town and to the shopping center in terms of being a successful venture if you were to allow this amendment and if we were able to go forward and do the development. So if we can take a couple of minutes, and I can turn the floor over to Mr. Stebbins, he can just tell you a little bit more about the dual brand concept, and we can answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I'm John Stebbins. I'm with XSS Hotels. XSS is a owner-operator of 25 hotels in the Northeast. We've developed around 50 hotels in the last 10 years. When we went to Marriott with the concept for 2 hotels, they said, well, we have been developing this concept of 2 combined hotels. It's called a dual brand. The benefits of it's especially applicable to 2 branded hotels that are going to be adjacent to each other or in the very near vicinity, because they would share or they would have duplicative shared spaces. All right, so they would have each would have their own standard size fitness rooms, standard size dining rooms, standard size market bar. The benefit of combining the 2 is that you get a enlarged, more advanced common space with more and better amenities, right? So we would have a much larger lobby with more seating space. There'd be more people in the lobby, so it'd be better activated. We double the size of the fitness room. We have 2 meeting rooms in one hotel versus 1. This concept has been rolled out in a number of markets across the country, and it's been incredibly well received by the guests. The guest satisfaction scores at these properties are generally 5 to 10 points higher versus the comparable single branded product. So they said, we really want you to do this at your Project Nordberg.
Can you speak a little to what would happen with the existing Residence Inn?
Sure, yeah. We would completely, and we are already planning to completely renovate the existing Residence Inn. So that means all new furniture, all new finishes, carpet, wall covering, lighting fixtures. In essence, we're going to be, at the end of this project, we're going to have 2 brand new hotels.
No, I'm guessing that the 2 different hotels service different markets?
Yeah, that's what I was about. What's the difference between
Yeah,
the 2?
absolutely. So the Residence Inn is what's called an extended stay hotel. It has a small kitchenette. It's meant for the traveler who is spending 3, 4, 5, even more nights. We have some guests who stay months at a time in the hotel as they are at assignment at a job. Jillian could speak more to that. And the Fairfield Inn is more of a transient hotel. It has a smaller guest room. Many of the rooms, as you can see, the light teal color rooms are 2-bed rooms, so they would have 2 queen-size beds. Mm-hmm. The other green shade are king rooms, so they have different room types. It's a smaller room, generally less expensive.
Okay. All right. Okay. Explains it.
All right. Is there anything else related to the petition that we need to know before we decide to at least hear? So you said you wanted to try to combine the special permit part with the petition for the zone change. If we
I did. The one thing I do want to make sure that I point out, going back to the site plan, is that we will be conforming in all other respects with zoning. So we don't have any issues, won't need any variances for the buildings. Signage, there's already signage variance with the Residence Inn. We may need to get some modifications to that. But with respect to size of the building, coverage, all of the improvements, the infrastructure, it all will accommodate what we're doing
So
here.
we won't be sending you to the ZBA to decide if it can happen. It's
Not to decide if the
Okay.
building can be constructed. It may be an issue with the signage that we have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for, but not with respect
Right.
to the construction. And we're ready to go.
Okay.
Which I do want to emphasize that, because I know we have been here a number of times, and this is something that we are hoping that we can be positioned to start construction of the new addition by the summer, but actually start the renovation process of the existing Residence Inn months before that.
So what would the target be for opening
we
up?
would
Is it
schedule.
spring of 2021?
Probably
It would be about a 12-year project.
Don't- yeah.
No, New York State projects are 12-year projects. Yeah, that's right.
So basically, you would like to get on an agenda for a hearing in January? is kind of
I
yours.
I would. I'd like to hear from you that it's okay that I submit the formal application for the amendment of the special use permit. I'd like to get scheduled for later in December so that you can make all of the referrals that you need to make, that you can circulate notice of intent to be
Sure.
lead agency under SECRA, and then schedule
I
a
would like to
public
get
hearing.
that out.
I,
at the
I
next
would
meeting,
too,
yeah.
but two of the board members are not here because they got stuck in Florida. I would recommend that you try to reach out to those two board members before the next meeting, because if they have a lot of questions that can't be answered, I will defer to them and not vote on it at the next meeting, and that's the last meeting.
Yeah,
All right.
that's a good idea.
I was here when this first came in, the project, the Commons, and I'm glad to see that it's not the second hotel, but the concept, I'm happy to see that we're moving ahead with that, so that's good.
If I may,
Yeah.
gentlemen, I'd just like to make a comment, make you aware of what we're also doing as a good neighbor in this community, and I make this comment in light of the fact that John Murphy was up here with all the wonderful children and people in the town who contributed to Homes for Heroes. As we renovate this second hotel, which John said will happen in February, March, we will be donating over 100 rooms of furnitures to organizations here in the county and in Westchester who service homeless veterans.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
great.
One other question. Do we have any movement regarding the pad for the restaurant or the bank? Or we're hoping that this will activate that?
We're hopeful that it will. Obviously, more people that stay on the property, and we have more rooms that will generate interest for a restaurant pad. We obviously want one. It betters the people who stay at our hotels. National restaurant chains are already in the area on Route 59 in Northvale. We're hoping that maybe we can get a local restaurateur who, may be of interest, so we seek it every day to try and find somebody that would take the pad site.
You know what I always thought would look good there?
We have interest,
Five
we
Guys?
just,
No,
still
not
waiting.
Five.
Esther, what
Cracker
about Five
Barrel.
Guys?
A Cracker Barrel would be perfect there, I think. Because there's none in this area. It's right by the hotels.
People like Cracker.
Cracker Barrel's a good restaurant.
I know.
You gotta travel for that.
You gotta go Jersey.
You gotta get a Cracker Barrel in there, that's what I'm saying.
You know, we have had
You got my
interest,
vote then. I won't be here, but.
we have had interest. I mean, the eateries are going through transition in this period, and it's gone from, things that I think meet the definition of fast food under your code, but are not the traditional version of fast food, and they've expressed interest, but there's that issue of,
All right.
the strict definition.
You always ask, and,
Okay, put them on for.
okay.
The
We'll get
17th.
your stuff together to put on and send out for the 17th, the next meeting, and that way you can get on the agenda for January for your hearing. If we can get you will get your petition in, is that
Great.
work for you,
So
to
the peti-
circulate it?
The petition is in, we'll make sure we circulate, we'll file the special use permit
Yes.
materials, some of which have already been submitted as part of this petition. And if you would schedule us for the 17th, we can
Yep.
revisit,
Yes.
the ability to schedule a
And,
hearing and do the
and
referral.
just reach out
And
to those
reach
two,
out.
reach out to those two.
Mr. Rossi heard that, and we will
Thank
do
you very
that.
much.
We gotta go in the next
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Yeah. Rob, do we need to go to exec session now, or
Yeah.
do I do now?
Oh, I thought we're meeting at.
Do we have to do it at 8:30? We want to not?
Yeah, just-
Okay.
All right, so we'll move forward then. Since I know there's people here for the hearing. Yeah. Okay.
We can even vote on it.
Thank you.
with 3 guys,
It's not going to require 4.
but I don't know. I think you gotta,
I don't even know if you. Well, let's go through and we're gonna.
because
We'll do the work. We'll do the workshop real quick, and then we'll go back
Okay.
and open up that hearing, and then we'll go through it. All right. So first, we're going to go through what we have on the agenda real quick. And that was all our presentations. Then we'll come back around for the public hearing and then general public comment. First item, number 3 on the voting resolutions, is the adoption of a town board meeting calendar, which is an attachment sent around earlier. Does anyone have any issues with the dates for next year's meetings that is here today?
Nope.
You're good? You're good? Here, let me know by the end of the meeting.
All right.
What? Your what? Oh, Tom, he needs that paper. Okay, next item is the public hearing, which we will be opening as soon as we go through these things, so for the Haber code changes. Next is the SECRA vote on that. Next is the continue close on that, which I guess is kind of in the opposite order for some reason. Then we have the adoption of local law, if we do choose to adopt. Then number 8 is to accept a grant for funding of smart street lighting. We talked about this earlier. It's sensors to, we got sensors to do, test out dimming the LEDs at a certain time. This gives us money now in exchange for having done that. $75,000 for programs that we have here. Then number 9, there's a conference for training on Laserfiche, which is our catch-all filing system that we have for everything in the town to send our IT folks to. They'll be plugged in remotely for that in February. Then we're retaining the TGKI law firm. We mentioned this, we pulled it off a previous agenda item. This is essentially a class action lawsuit for municipalities against people who, the companies that did the opioid stuff. Rob?
Right, somewhat. They're, the county.
Close, right? It was close.
Pretty close.
Okay.
The county of Rockland actually is in a lawsuit with respect to the opioid litigation. This came to our attention that this really doesn't necessarily change that. It's just that we were not a direct party to the lawsuit with retaining this firm, and it's really at no cost to the town. If we recover nothing, we owe nothing. Any of their expenses are paid out of any recovery we get. They represent many, many municipalities out in Long Island. Several in the county have also retained them. And it's just, frankly, it gives the town of Orangetown a seat at the table and an opportunity to vote with respect to any settlement, so, or continuing. So I had spoken with the county. They didn't have an issue with it in terms of, affecting their participation. So that's why we decided to go ahead and retain them.
Sounds good. Then we have a settlement of claim, Structure Works Construction for damage result of its operation of a town-owned vehicle, $5,000 and change. Then we have lend assistance for Share Christmas in Bronzedorf Park, God bless you, on Friday, December 6th. Then Highway Department, we have the lend assistance for the annual Santa Claus 5K run, Veterans Memorial Park on December 8th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Then lend assistance for the John Paulding Engine Company Fund Drive.
Which already happened.
Which did happen already, so we have to vote for that. I mean, we don't have to, which would be kind of messed up if we did.
We already did.
We did it already. Then we have a series of fee changes based on recommendation of Highway Superintendent Dean. A lot of these haven't been updated in many years, so we have fee changes for road excavations, driveway, and heavy hauling.
Sounds good.
Then we have other similar changes to similar sets of fees. Then we have changes of fees for the non-green waste material drop-off fee. And then we're down to police. Participation, the Police Services Grant Program, we're accepting $12,000 to use for traffic safety purposes. Then finance, we're retaining bond counsel. We're gonna have a couple of edits to this. We had, Jeff, this doesn't reflect the playground and veterans, right? It does, the reduction. Okay, to 250. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're adding, after speaking with Superintendent Dean, I had reduced the pavement preservation to 1.8 from 2, but the intent was to keep the same level of service as the previous 1.8, but with the cost increases, some of the savings from a grant we're getting that we took out, we'll reallocate back to that to make it 2.0 million instead of 1.8 million. We still, so the story with the bonds as proposed, we had 500 initially draft allocated to redo the Veterans Memorial Park Playground Complex. We also had applications in for two different grants, from our legislator and assemblywoman and senator for $250 each. We've gotten word back on one, so we've reduced by $250, but we have not yet gotten word back on the second one. They both put it in, and it's just a matter of the formal approval. So we're hoping by the next meeting, we'll know 100% on that last $250, and we could just take it out
Well,
at that point.
I got a question. So the resolution isn't to agree to fund these bonds, it's just to.
No, it's to retain the bond council.
No, just, I mean,
Yeah.
again, we only have three members here tonight. I think if we're gonna vote almost $10 million worth of bonds, we should have.
No,
No, that's the question I had, you know?
yeah, no, we're not issuing, this is not to issue the bonds, this is to let him get the council to start the
All
process
right,
going.
all right, that's all I wanna
Yep.
know.
No.
All right,
Okay, so again, reflecting that edit of 2.0 instead of 1.8, and then we have the audit. By another 2. Yes, exactly. Okay, so going back, we do have a public hearing on the calendar.
do we have the final law?
The final law, I'm gonna read it off. I'm gonna summarize it and I'll pass it around, but there's some edits that were made to it. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Moved.
Councilman Divney, second by Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Do we have another copy of this?
Do we have any more copies of this? I think there's some in the back, or no? Yeah. Yeah, can you read copy, Dennis, do you have a copy that can be run off that you're holding on to?
What?
I don't know why we only have
Do I
one.
really wanna what?
It's not, I fixed it all.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so he's gonna run off some copies of the current one.
Wasn't a big fan of it to begin with.
So, this has been publicized and everything is required, Rosanna? We did the publication notice and everything? Okay, and circulated. Any comments that were negative in any way?
I don't think we received any comments, Dennis. Was there really not much circulation? Right.
It didn't need to go to any outside agencies, right, okay. And just from a procedural standpoint, for this matter, do we need 3 votes or 2 votes in this situation to pass it? We need to get the 3-0. I'm just making sure it's not like 2-1 majority against people present. We don't usually have 3 people here, that's what I'm saying. So usually it's 4 or 5. We always need 3 in those cases.
I really think we should have.
So we may not vote tonight because of the sheer lack of humans here. We may push it off to continue to the next meeting, but we did have it scheduled, and obviously there's a lot of people present to hear it. So we had basically an issue, and I'm going to summarize it generally, because there were several edits that were done to try to reflect concerns by the board, including myself, about the original proposal. But basically, Haber governs a couple of zones in the town, and right now there's a hard line drawn of 1918 for certain rules that regulate different appearance things in those districts. 1918 was kind of an arbitrary date chosen. How many years back was it from when they formed the Haber? 75 years? Something like that?
1970s?
Yeah, so it was, I think they picked a date 75 years prior to when they created Haber and made that the date when you were historically significant. At issue is that certain things require everyone to come in and certain things require only houses prior to 1918 to come in. And certain houses that have come in for things that they're required to that are not prior to 1918, because of decisions by Haber, are now required to come in for everything. So there's kind of a hodgepodge mix. And there's also no way to, so like if you have a 1918 house, you have to come in for basically everything with no pre-approvals or anything like that. And whereas if you have a 1919 house, you come in, you can do changes to the exterior structure without coming in at all, unless of course you had gone in previously for a building permit, in which case you have to come in anyway, but you wouldn't necessarily know that right away. The proposed changes to the code as in the current final version, and copies are being made right now, essentially changes the process so that you're removing the 1918 line and you're allowing for direct application to Haber for everything that does not require a building permit that otherwise would go to Haber. So exterior changes to the structure don't require a building permit as they did in the original draft. They require direct application with no fee to Haber. However, these are things like you want to paint the exterior of the structure, you want to put a fence on, you want to do a shed, that sort of thing, which wouldn't require a building permit, but this would involve Haber, but now they're involved sometimes and not all the time. What was included also along with this is a very long list of pre-approved paint colors and pre-approved appearance things for fences and structures to allow people to not have to come in at all if they use anything from the last couple pages. Thank you. There's two different brands which make two of the most common brands. You got Sherwin-Williams and Benjamin Moore have historical color palettes. Then we're looking at, what is this, like 100 and something colors, something like that? 237 colors to choose from, plus white, that if you choose to paint your house, if you're in one of the historical districts and you choose to paint your house or your shed or your fence one of these 237 colors plus white, or natural wood in the case of a fence, you don't have to come to Haber no matter what. You don't have to show up, you don't have to be there, just paint it that color. Previously, you would have had to come in anyway, that's gone. If you want to paint something other than one of those 237 colors, you go directly to Haber, you get added on as other business, there's no notification process, no anything that requires any sort of extra paperwork or time or money, and you go in and you get the approval because you wanted to pick one from a different palette for some reason instead of these 237. The idea is that basically to compromise between, and this, in one sense, this adds some burden on on homes that were post-1918, but it actually reduces some burden on homes that are post-1918 and had that requirement to come to Haber for exterior changes from previous decisions, and also pre-1918 houses. It reduces it by giving these pre-approved lists. The goal is to create one consistent rule for the historic district, so the regulations are based on the district level, not on an individual home level, because that's more of a historic site regulation as opposed to a historic district regulation. So that was in the end the goal of this final version, or this final for hearing version, I should say, to allow it to be a consistent process, get rid of this hodgepodge of back and forth post-1918, pre-1918, let people have a process by which they could change the exterior of their house without ever coming to Haber at all, but also make sure that when they do that, it still kind of fits the general tone of Tappan and Palisades areas. So that's where we're looking at right now, and you have the law change in front of you. Dennis, is there anything you want to add to that substance?
I just wanted to, well, as member Lauren Plotkin pointed out to me, a house could also be not only just painted white, but one of the pre-approved list of 236 or 237 colors, but also an existing color
Right,
on
yes,
the
that's the other
house.
thing. If it already has the color, it doesn't have to come in.
Previously approved.
Yes.
And I just want to point out, this is my omission, everything's good. Focus on the marked up version, because I just noticed sitting here that my cleaned up version, the 5th version, I left out the part about sending out a notice of the chapter 12 whenever there's a sale of a house. That is in the marked up version. It will be in the final approved. It's for some reason when
It is in there.
I created two 5th versions, a marked up version and a cleaned up version. For some reason, the cleaned up version left out that paragraph about, it's in 12-4I, paragraph 2. If you'll notice in the cleaned up version, it's missing. And that simply mirrors 12-4I, paragraph 1, except it has to do with whenever there's a conveyance of real property within a historic area, the supervisor, with the assistance of the tax assessor, will send out a copy of Chapter 12 to the new owners saying, welcome to the community. By the way, you're in a historic area and you're subject to Chapter 12, and here's a copy.
So, and just to translate that from legal
Okay.
speak, basically,
If
when
you're
the,
looking at the cleaned up version, the 5th version, the
Yeah.
cleaned up version, you're missing that
I get that
12-4, paragraph
Yes.
I, subparagraph 2.
I'm just going to translate what it does, though.
I understand that, but how does that help you if you've already bought the house?
So,
By the way, you bought the house and now you're subject to all these rules and regulations.
Well, there's no other way of doing it, unless, of course.
No, I'm just saying, it's like, you bought the house and guess what? Here's what you have behind door number 1.
So
Doesn't make sense
The
to
law,
me.
the code change for the notification has one to be sent out if the law passes, or
If it's amended, which
it's
I would think
amended.
answer Pops
and
Tom's
then one to
question.
pass when we see that there's a transfer in property, which is the only time we would know there was a transfer in property.
Right.
But everyone would get it immediately
Now,
after the law
if
is
this
changed
is enacted, as 12-12 12-4, paragraph I, paragraph 1 says, as soon as there's any amendments adopted to this chapter 12, we're going to send it out to everyone in the historic area.
Right.
So that might answer Tom's concern.
And it still does reflect in the building, files that it's in the historic
I
district.
don't want to muddy the waters, but what if you made it, anybody who's selling has to provide proof that they,
You're muddying the waters.
I mean, the reality is that someone buying would get, if they get their property file, it's gonna show they're in the historic district, right? Like,
No.
No.
okay. Well, that's a problem.
Well, then that would mean someone in some department is gonna have to monitor the multiple listing to see if homes are listed for sale. Is that what you're suggesting?
something to the effect of that.
Is there any notification process now?
No,
Okay, so this is better than what we have, I would imagine.
definitely.
Okay, so let's move forward with the public hearing and figure out edits after we've at least heard from at least a couple people from the public.
Okay.
All right, so thank you, Dennis, for your service. We're going to open up the public portion now, because we have some people that signed in. All right, so you have up to 5 minutes if you need it. No yielding of time, and please stay on topic for the public hearing at hand. This is a general public comment. This is only for the specific topic. If you have general public comment, that's later. Susan Nemezdi of Palisades.
I'm not Susan, but she had to go. It was her son's birthday.
Okay.
She just wanted me to give you some pictures, and she
Carol, did you, I'm sorry, just, yeah.
I'm sorry.
You did sign in, right, Carol?
I did.
Can you come up when you signed in?
Sure.
And then you can just mention what she said,
Yes.
because technically you're not supposed to do that. So it's not, it's just a technicality. And I saw your name on here anyway. So Susan's not here, so we'll go with Alice Gerard of Palisades. Whenever you're ready.
Supervisor Day, members of the board, thank you for listening to me. I'm here to ask that you not make any final decision on these proposals tonight, and I'll give you my reasons. Tappan was well ahead of its time in creating a historic district and historic law in 1965, but it took about 2 years of discussion and controversy before the proposal became law. Palisades also took its time in creating a historic law in 1968, holding community meetings and discussions before submitting the idea to the Orangetown Town Board for enactment. The townwide committee, charged in 1995 with re-examining the two historic laws, met for 2 years before submitting its recommendations, which were enacted into law in 1997. Throughout, changes were only made after time for reflection and community input. Supervisor Day, you did a fine job of describing the proposed changes, but you can see they are complicated and not easy to understand. Both Palisades and Tappan historic laws made a distinction between older and newer houses. Originally, for both of them, it was 100 years, houses 100 years old that were treated with more supervision from HABR. In 1995, that was changed to 1918 as a division because the previous one, 100 years old, meant that new houses were added each year, and the owners did not always realize this, so that became a problem. Now members want to change that, want to get rid of that distinction, which has been there for 50 years and provided important protection from some regulations for newer houses. Now members of HABR want to remove the law completely, without which not the law, but the 1918 division. Neither of the original historic laws would have passed without that distinction between older and newer houses. I and other historians met with several HABR members on November 8th to ask them to reconsider the idea. After our discussion, we were told that they planned to wait until the new year to present the proposed change, which might have been amended. We asked to be kept informed, but due to communication problems, it was only 3 days before Thanksgiving that I learned that HABR members were going ahead on December 3rd to present the idea to the community. Because of the holidays, it was difficult to reach community members to attend this meeting. It's not my opinion that matters here. It's the public's opinion. They have not been informed or given an opportunity to comment on the complicated changes, and the presentations have been inconsistent. I asked you to wait to decide this question until you have more input from the community. In the past, during the vinyl siding wars, Tappan residents became so angry at HABR's unilateral actions that a Tappan-wide poll with a 50% return found that 55% of Tappan residents would prefer to leave the historic district if they could. I don't really think we want to go back to those bad old days. The idea of creating a list of approved exterior paint colors seems to be the result of HABR's disapproval of a Palisades house that was painted a vivid yellow last year. Apparently, 2 people in Palisades objected to the color. Neither I, the immediate neighbors, nor the rest of the people I have talked to about the house were in favor of forcing the owner to repaint the house. However, in spite of a petition with 36 signatures disagreeing with the HABR decision that the owner must repaint, HABR went ahead with their decision and created a list of approved paint colors. As far as I have been able to find out, this is only the second instance of an unacceptable paint color in the last 50 years. The first one was a purple house, actually an appropriate color for a Victorian house in Tappan, that HABR tried to make the owner repaint. He refused. It was eventually repainted after he left the town. A.C. Spektorsky, in his 1955 book, The Exurbanites, notes that Rockland County has always been an area of originality and nonconformity with a live and let live atmosphere. That statement, I'll just finish very quickly, is particularly true of Palisades, because one of our residents, Mary Tonetti, created an artist's colony. Many of the people who came and lived there and rented were forerunners who later changed the color. So, thank you. That's what
If you have any other comments, you can submit them in writing as well, so feel free to
Okay.
do that. Yeah, thank you. Next, we have Carol Lavalle, I'm sorry, I can tell if it's an E or an I. Laval. Okay, up to Pam. Whenever you're ready. If you could just move the microphone a little in front of you. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. I'm representing the Tappan Town Historical Society. I'm the president. And also, I'm a resident of Tappan. I live in a 1750 house on Main Street. But my interest isn't personal. It's really here to say that unfortunately our board, which was supposed to meet tonight, did not, because we wanted to be represented here. We have not had a chance to look at the latest changes in the proposal, but the original, or at least the most recent one, is that we were able to consider, concurs with what Alice, in fact, said, that we would rather see the 1918 distinction made, and it may, in fact, be more helpful and clarifying in the long run, rather than having everyone have to come before HABR, which could increase their workload considerably. We also agree that as generous as those 250 historic colors are, it really isn't necessary for, say, a split level or a raised ranch in the historic area to have a historic color on it, as long as HABR decides that it is compatible and harmonious with its surroundings. So we really don't see the need for that. And also, the notarized statement, actually, I think it's quite unrealistic that a homeowner is going to actually do that. And will probably be mostly annoyed at having to do that, and most likely will ignore it, which could raise another enforcement issue, which could be avoided by just simply having approval by HABR. So those are two problems we see. We also, however, are very pleased to see notification by the town for homeowners, and also, as Dennis Michaels, I was looking at the copy he's referring to that has his line changes in it, that new purchasers of homes in the historic area be apprised of that. It would be great if the real estate people would do that, but many do not. Many are ignorant of it to themselves, or they feel it might not be helpful for a sale, because some people aren't fond of being in the historic area. So this would be very helpful for that notification for both groups, the present homeowners and the new purchasers. We would like to suggest that we help the Historic Society help write a cover letter explaining the advantages of being in a historic area. We have in the past worked with the town on 2 pamphlets and letters over the past 50 years, about every 10 years, to write an explanation of why this is an important, valuable thing to maintain, to pay attention to, and to help preserve. And so we certainly would like to help with a letter that could go in to the notification of the homeowners. And lastly, I want to say that Havar does a very valuable job, and we have seen them work sometimes over several years, in fact, with homeowners to apply the code correctly and honor the intent and the application of the codes. So this is not a criticism of Havar's efforts at all to simplify these processes. And we'd also like to suggest that in this letter to homeowners, that if they want to make changes, they consult with Havar members ahead of time before making applications that may need to be deferred or denied or changed in major ways, because they do that, and then and they do it very well, so that the first time an application comes through, it's more likely to be approved because of their efforts at advising those homeowners ahead of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mary Cardenas, head of our museum from Japan.
Good evening. The houses that were designated as part of the historic areas that were built before 1918 have been selected because of their historic contribution to that community during that period of time. The houses embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or they represent the work of a particular builder or possess high artistic value. That is why they are protected by the Historic Areas Board of Review. Houses built after 1918 do not qualify because they may fall outside the criteria. The state and national registers' criteria for evaluation look at the quality of significance in American history, architecture, and culture that is present. Here in Orangetown, many of the houses we see today were built in the late 1940s and 50s, post-World War II. Many more houses were built in the early 60s and mid-70s. These are development-type housing, and they do not qualify as representing a particular builder or of historic value. They should not be subjected to the same controls within the historic areas concerning choice of paint colors, as long as they are harmonious to their location. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol, you can come back up now. Go ahead.
Thank you Supervisor Day and the Town Board for exploring this Haber situation and recommendation. I live in Palisades Historic District, and as the Palisades, president of the Palisades Community Center, which was Palisades Schoolhouse built in 1870, I and 8 other board members volunteer our time and efforts to make critical repairs and restoration to this beautiful schoolhouse. I am actively concerned with historic protection. Thankfully, in the 1960s, a group of people and the town board felt various historical significant areas in the town were worthy of protecting and created historic districts, not just particular houses, but of entire neighborhoods, districts. Yes, sometimes it's a burden to live in a historic district because of all the added regulations, but the rewards outnumber the regulations, and the rewards are great. 3 years ago, I was on a committee to tighten up Haber's rules because there were many areas in the rules that were confusing, loose, and up for translation. Haber's basic premise is that any exterior changes or new construction had to be harmonious to the surrounding homes. We looked at regulations of other New England historic towns, which were very detailed and specific. We wanted to make clear about different situations that we're confronted with, for example, a 12,000 square foot home, how we could protect the harmonious situation. At the last town meeting, clearly everyone in the room was confused at the current law. You can imagine how confusing it is for those who live there. Who is supposed to get approval and who is not, and even for contractors, they don't know. This new regulation makes it simple in supporting the terminology harmonious for every home in the district, just as it is for any other exterior change or new construction for all homes is required. Here are 3 confusing examples. A few years ago, Yonder Hill, a landmark building built in 1850s on the corner of Closter Road and Route 9W, was in the process of repainting it white, same as it has been for over 100 years. A code enforcer stopped the painting, saying they had to go before the historic board for approval, regardless that they were painting it the same color. Number 2, a house was painted a very different color than it had been before without going to Haber, even though there was a previous decision that if they were to make any future exterior changes, they needed to go before Haber. So they were then dragged back to Haber after it was painted. Confusing. Number 3, an owner was finishing up a major renovation and at the end wanted to change its current color to white. Since painting wasn't part of the original permit, it meant they would have to go back and get an additional permit to paint it and appear before the historic board, which could take, as we know, months. In frustration, they repainted the house the same color. Each of these 3 situations is very frustrating, and nobody really knows what they're supposed to do. The new law would have solved these problems. You can paint your home the same color, or you can paint it white, or you can select from a palette of over 200 colors and not be required to go to the building department, pay a $100 permit fee, or wait perhaps months to make an appearance before Haber. It's clear, efficient, and upholds the basic premise and mission of Haber to protect the harmony of homes in the historic district. And if somebody wants to paint it a different color, there's no problem. They can go before the historic board, as they would have had to have done anyway, and this does not mean that color would be rejected. The new regulation avoids confusion of what am I supposed to do and who is the rule meant for. It levels the playing field for all in the neighborhoods, and it gives people lots of different color options, making it easier, quicker, and painless. And no one has to say, you painted your house without approval and I didn't. I want to paint my house the same color, and why do I have to go back to the board? I want to paint it white, it's always white, why do I have to go back to the board? The issue of painting is a small issue, but it shouldn't be an added level of stress for people. I support the change to make it clear, understandable, practical, and efficient while retaining the ultimate purpose of Haber, which is to continue its harmonious mission for all in the district. Susan Nemesdi had to leave, but she also...
If you have written notes, we can take them and put them in the record.
Yeah.
Yeah. just
She
pass them to
supports the
clerk.
painting, but she has an issue with the fencing. Should I just give this to you?
Just give it to the clerk and we'll make sure they get in the record. Before we go to, no one else has signed in, so I understand there's definitely more people coming, but we're just gonna hit a quick pause. Are we gonna be comfortable voting tonight? I don't think so, right? Because we only have 3 people. There's definitely feedback. So if that informs anyone's decision as to whether they want to speak tonight, you're all welcome to. It's a public hearing, but there won't be a vote held tonight. We're gonna schedule a continuation. So knowing that, is there anyone else here who would like to speak tonight? You're welcome to. I just want to make sure.
I do.
Yes, sir. Please state your name and place of residence for the record when you begin speaking. Thank you.
My name is Fred Little. I live in Palisades, New York, in the Historic District. And coincidentally, Alice is my mother-in-law. She and my father-in-law, my late father-in-law, were instrumental in the original codification of the Historic District. And based on the stories I heard as early as 1986 from both of them, the 1918 requirement was at that time a rock-solid requirement in order to win the support of local people, many of whom were concerned that they were going to be placed under the jurisdiction of a board, of a historic board, inappropriately, given the vintage of their own homes. The 1918 date was, from that perspective, okay, originally 100 years, we went back to 50 and 68, but this was something of a sacred trust. We will not seek to change this at a later date. This is a betrayal of many of the people who originally voted to support the district. And Alice's remarks regarding the results of the vinyl siding wars in Tappan are salutary. There is a very real risk here that in losing the support of the public, the board could create a situation in which local residents seek to disestablish the historic districts, and this would be tragic. It is not an outcome I wish to see. Additional points to be raised here. These are changes that very few people in the community are asking for, and many people in the community oppose. The paint colors which are particularly, which have been codified here, are based on 2 proprietary commercial palettes. This seems to me at a minimum like an improper favoring of one manufacturer over another manufacturer. More to the point, paint values, color values can be expressed as RGB, they can be expressed as CMYK, they can be expressed in Pantone numbers. There are industry standards for how to do this, and it's not this swatch from the Sherwin-Williams paint selection. Additionally, on the question of color, are we talking about the color of a house when it was originally painted? Or are we talking about that fine, mellow shade that it came to 10 years after being painted? That matters a great deal. Are we totally eliminating the period between 1880 and 1918? This was the high point of the Painted Lady. We're in the lower Hudson Valley. Extremely bright paint colors were the norm in the late 19th and early 20th century. And there are historic examples of people doing things with older houses, putting paint jobs on older houses during that period that from a contemporary perspective we might think, that's a little off, that's a colonial house. Why are you giving it a Painted Lady treatment, color treatment? Well, people did that. It's historically legitimate. The word harmony has been used a lot. My day job is as the lead academic advisor at the New Jersey School of Architecture. I spend a lot of time in architecture reviews, looking at buildings, looking at historic preservation issues. I'm not claiming to be an architect. I'm not claiming to be a preservationist. I am fairly familiar with the issues. The National Park Service guidelines on historic districts are quite clear. Best practices in historic districts are that all new construction should clearly be constructed of materials and in a style which is distinct from the historic elements in the district, precisely so as not to create a false history for the era, but to very clearly represent what is historical and not to misrepresent what is not historical. The kind of Little Williamsburg sensibility here, or the little colonial village, is both ahistorical and it's not in keeping with best practices. Practices under the NPS guidelines are more to eliminating 12,000 square foot houses, making sure that the size, the scale, the volume, the height, the facade of buildings is not wildly out of proportion with the surrounding houses. And sadly, the board has chosen to concentrate on matters of cosmetic appearance, minor matters of cosmetic appearance, rather than the larger question of size and scale. And this has been the case for some 35 years. So I am somewhat at a loss to understand why the proposal has come forward, what basis for it is, but I think of all of these, if there is a mandatory realtor notice, and if realtors were to be sanctioned for not making that representation to potential buyers, that would be a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment tonight on the topic at hand? Yes, in the back.
Hello, my name is Faye Fleming. I live on Washington Spring Road. Further to what Alice and Fred have both said, I only was made aware of these changes last night. And I've since last night spoken to about 10 members of my community who are all absolutely horrified at what has been suggested. Agreed, none of us have really been able to have time to fully digest what is being discussed or suggested. So I'm glad you're not going to be taking a vote for tonight. One point I would like to make regarding the word harmonious is that Palisades, certainly the Sneedon's Landing part of Palisades, is particularly desirable precisely because it is not harmonious or in keeping with little New England towns. There was a 2018 New York Times article, and quotes from that are such as, "A small enclave with a big personality, a live and let live kind of place." Another quote, "Less than perfectly groomed." And then another quote, "The houses here are the real personalities. Many of the houses have names just like people." And the other word that keeps coming up is eccentric. So we don't want to become a harmonious New England little town. And in my view, the control being pushed forward, and actually in the view of so far the, I think, 6 or 7 people I've spoken to, to me seems arbitrary, following the personal whims and tastes of a small group of people. Colour preference is entirely a matter of taste, and taste can fluctuate. I have 2 statements written by friends of mine who could not attend. If I can speak, if I can read those out.
Within your time, you're welcome to.
Okay. I will read...
and if you can't get to all of them, you can just submit
I
them.
can submit them.
Yeah.
Which one should I choose? Okay, I'll choose this one. "We all appreciate the town taking steps to make the act of painting a house in the historic district less of a burdensome process for all involved. However, as taxpayers, we are concerned about the arbitrary and capricious manner in which these colours appear to have been selected. The legislative intent of the historic district law is spelled out. He's written it out, but I'll just say it's the purpose and intent of the local law to protect these places and preserve the overall historic look and character." He continues to say, "However, the list of pre-approved paint colours attached to the proposed law change have very little to do with the overall historic look and character of the Tappan and Palisades historic area. Many of the colours on the Benjamin Moore list specifically state the towns where these colours were found on old houses. Sag Harbour Grey, for example, Marblehead Gold, Newburyport Blue, Georgetown Pink Beige, or Valleyford Brown. Pre-approving and thus instituting a strong legislative preference for certain colours, lest someone not wish to spend time and money on an unlisted hue that may have been in historic use in Long Island, Massachusetts, Virginia, or Pennsylvania, is not consistent with the intent of our law, which is to preserve the look and character of our corner of Rockland County. Furthermore, the Sherwin-Williams and Benjamin Moore historic colour collections are designed as marketing devices and can change, as tastes do, over time. There is no nexus between the colours selected and the intent of the historic district law, which is to preserve the look and character and historic colours of our area. There are a number of historic houses in our area that have colours that are unlisted here, and while those houses can be repainted in their colours, the law as drafted does not allow a neighbouring structure to be painted in a pre-existing colour already in the district. It makes little sense to allow me to paint my house in a historic colour from Maine, like Kennebunkport Green, without HABR approval, but not a shade of green that has been used by a fellow Palisadian's house on Closter Road for 100 years. New York City handles the painting of landmark structures in a way that may be instructive here. Rather than limit people to a specific list of brands and colours that may be discontinued at any time, the Landmarks Commission offers a menu of historic colours that could be used. My other person who's submitted something has made certain points. And this person works at the Landmark Protection Agency and preservation boards across the country. It says, 1, only historic buildings should be under jurisdiction, as if not, the landscape cannot evolve and will become a museum. Buildings such as certain houses he lists would not have been allowed, which would be an extreme infringement on citizen rights. This is typical in all historic landmark districts he's ever worked in. And we require a definition of what qualifies as a historic structure. Number 2, choosing a palette of paint colours is a useful and common tool when applied to properties deemed historic, but the proper approach is to have an independent party or firm versed in architecture develop the guidelines, which would include colours and trim detailing. And it should not be enacted without accepted definitions of historic classification. And point 3, the board cannot and should not dictate or make design decisions as they are opinion unless the board is populated with only those of a lifetime of architectural and historic experience. And number 4, if the board wants to do this, they would need to hire an outside architectural firm with extensive experience in and speciality in historic structures, and the board should vote on the recommendation. He goes on, and this is just people that I've spoken to since last night, and I can tell you that the amount of feeling about this matter in our neighbourhood is quite extreme. I think I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you. Who else? All right. Yes, sir.
My name is Michael LePlac. I live here in Blauvelt in an historic home, and my colors are on this list from Benjamin Moore. My real concern, the conversation about color is one thing, but my real concern with this board is, are all historic houses valuable? 4.5 years ago, the Lent House was torn down, and I just wanted to note that the people who were here before talking about adding a dual-purpose hotel are doing it on the site where that historic home was torn down. So I think the color issue is a lot less important than this town's commitment to our history. That's the issue. You can pick the colors you like. Somebody said that you would go before the board if you wanted to do a painted lady, and you could be approved, but I think it's more important that we have a commitment to the historic homes already here and that we don't lose any more of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, front.
I'm Jackie Drexler, and I actually live in Valley Cottage, but I'm a former Palisadian. Nice to see Alice and Fred and Michael and other people here. Thank you for holding this little public hearing tonight. The house that I grew up in was a contemporary ranch that ended up having a modern bedroom addition and then had to connect with the old part of the house. And the old part of the house, the old part, which was pretty old. I don't know, Alice, do you know how old our barn was? No, I don't even know how old it was. Pink. It was painted pink. And I cannot tell you how many people tried to get that shade of pink. They would come to our house and try to understand that shade of pink on the stucco, okay? Had to be from, I don't even know when that part of the house was from. The thing is, we have beautiful old homes, and the people who buy the beautiful old homes, they're buying it because they love that, and they want to preserve it. And I do believe that the whole idea of color, Rockland County is unique, and there are a lot of artists, there's a lot of people who lived in these communities, such as Alice, where people had the right to be able to do what they wanted with their homes, and it was in keeping with the neighborhood, just like South Mountain Road. It's very eclectic, and I believe that people should be able to express themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Claire Sheridan. I live in Tappan, 242 Kings Highway, in the Historic District. I first would like to say that I concur wholeheartedly with Alice Gerard and with Mr. Little. I want to say first that In addition to living in the affected area, I am the chairperson of the Historic Preservation Committee at the Historical Society of Rockland County. I want to thank HABOR for the work that they do. I know from personal experience that what they do is important. They serve a vital function and work hard to make things work efficiently, fairly, and expeditiously. Historic areas are better served when such a body is present and working effectively like ours does. I have 3 concerns about the proposal set forth. First, the chosen palette for a structure makes a dramatic statement about a building's architecture and its history. In addressing color change proposals, removing HABOR from the review process may seem like a way to expedite the process, when in actuality it may create more problems. Allowing a large list of what paint companies deem historic colors to be used without professional review removes the ability of a historic-minded group like HABOR from assessing how well a color change acknowledges the house's architectural style, its larger neighborhood context. Style dictates that colors stay true to the house. For example, the Greek Revival and Italianate houses of the mid-1800s typically displayed pale colors. The pendulum swung toward deep, rich tones in the late 1800s, culminating in multicolor schemes of the ornate Queen Anne style. By the early 1900s, however, light body and trim colors returned with the neoclassical and colonial revival, and bungalows reintroduced earth tones. If I'm reading the proposed rule change correctly, it would allow the DeWint House in Tappan or the Big House in Palisades, both 18th century brick and or stone houses, to be painted all white without any input from HABOR. I think you'll agree that it's doubtful that the founders of the historic areas would be in favor of that. I know I wouldn't be in favor of it. In addition, the historic districts in both Palisades and in Tappan are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. There are also other dwellings and structures within the historic areas that are in and of themselves listed on the National Register. The United States Department of Interior has recommended standards for places and areas on this listing. And what these standards recommend regarding paint colors is reproducing the appearance of historic paint colors and finishes based on documentary and physical evidence. What the standards discourage is using paint colors that cannot be documented through research and investigation, or using other undocumented finishes. In other words, the people sitting on the Historic Areas Board of Review are necessary when it comes to reviewing changes to old houses in the historic areas. We need their expertise, their nuanced views, and their valuable input. Taking them out of the process by simply creating a list of colors will remove the necessary review of this important group of professionals. Regarding fencing, my concern is like that of the color palettes. Fencing in the historic areas should be reviewed by HABOR for appropriateness of the age, size, scale of the dwelling, the property, and the surrounding area. Simply providing a list of approved fence types may seem like it will be expeditious, but it may create problems. For example, a high Victorian embellished wrought iron fence would not be appropriate at the manse in the Tappan Town Green. Removing the date from the regulations, thereby including every structure in the historic district, will bring into the review process many modern and contemporary dwellings. These structures were previously not included. In Tappan, where I live, there are several mid-century split-level ranch houses, the owners of which may not be familiar with the regulations of the historic area, and therefore this change may create ill will unnecessarily. Leaving the date of 1918 allows historic review to be just that, reviewing structures that are historic. In summary, I'm not in favor of the proposed changes. I am in favor of HABOR continuing to be a great resource for maintaining the integrity of historic places within the historic areas in Orangetown. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't see any other hands. I'm sorry, you spoke already, man. Oh, no, you, oh my God, you're related, I assume? Okay, go ahead. It confused me a little bit, sorry.
No, it's not a trick. I'm her sister.
Okay.
So my name is Jocelyn DiCrescenzo, and I live in Valley Cottage right now, although I did grow up in Palisades. And I concur with most of the people in this room that these are very beautiful. There are many beautiful old houses that do need to be protected, and they do need to be somewhat consistent within the neighborhood. I think keeping the timeline of 1918, I think, is that the correct number? Correct year? Is really terribly important. And I'm kind of bothered by the arbitrary nature of some of the rules that have been written. I don't think the town can view itself as like a condo association board and make rules that are really inappropriate to individual ideas. Everything that's been mentioned tonight is subjective. What's appropriate and what's harmonious, that's all very subjective. And I don't think that's appropriate, actually. I think it's not giving people very much choice, and I think people are entitled to choice in America. We're entitled to it. We've worked hard for it, and I usually think that people who purchase older buildings have great care and concern for those buildings, which is why they purchase them, and they do everything within their power to make sure that any changes are appropriate, and they seek the advice of professionals within that context to ensure that whatever it is they do is appropriate. I just think that you can see there are a lot of deep feelings in this room, a lot of deep emotion. And the reason why there's a lot of deep emotion is that we all love Rockland County and we love living here. And there are some things that are good to change, and maybe there's some things that aren't. It seems like a little burdensome to make this change. It seems very complicated and unnecessary, actually. And I guess that's it. I'm very glad, actually, that tonight you're not taking any votes, and I hope I'm going to be part of whatever chain there is, so I can be included in future discussions. These things, as Alice said earlier, have taken years to develop, and so it seems that there's a great deal of haste in pushing this through, and I think we really need to take a step back and really look at things carefully and in a considered manner, and be very careful about what we're planning on doing. It affects the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? I didn't see any other hands, but assuming there's not. All right, so, well, we're not going to close this. All right, Paula, before we make any out-of-hand motions, so we're going to, is everyone okay with continuing this to a later date to allow for further consideration and potential revision? Because it could be half adopted or not at all adopted or whatever, so continue. Okay, and we also have two other councilmen who haven't had a chance to weigh in, so. All right, we do have a,
Well,
yeah, Tom, what did you?
I don't know. I haven't been for this law from the get-go. It's, you know.
It's meeting with a lot of a stronger response than a lot of.
You buy a house, you know, especially you buy a high ranch from 1970, and now you're going in front of the historic, you know, boards. I don't get that. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not a historic house. It doesn't have any historic value if it's a 1983 split-level ranch or something like that. And you're bringing all these people that are now going to have to go in front of Habor, which is going to, and Carol Baxter even said, if you have to go in front of Habor, it's going to take months. You're trying to sell your house. You bought it in 1990. It has no historic significance. It just seems like we're bringing government into every aspect of our lives, including paint color on your house. It doesn't make sense to me. What doesn't make sense either is we've had more of a hearing on this than we did on a $77 million budget 2 weeks ago, which is what I can't believe either. So and that's the truth. We had more speakers tonight over paint colors than over a $77 million budget that we passed a couple of weeks ago, which blows my mind. I can't see myself voting for this at any time soon unless there's some serious revisions. So I think we hold it over and we don't set a date.
Yeah, I think it needs revision. It's just, there's, to Carol's points, there is definitely a need to fix parts of this process. It's not functioning as intended. And that's a perfect couple of examples of houses that are currently covered that it becomes excessively burdensome, or it doesn't properly do what was intended. But I think there's a strong reaction about the idea of expanding it beyond 1918, and I think there's.
But I also think
Consider it.
you have to change it. You have a 1983 High Ranch, and you go in front of Habor for some reason.
No, I get, yeah.
Then you're in front of Habor for the rest of that house's natural life.
That's a concern.
That
in my
makes
mind.
no sense to me
How,
whatsoever.
and that's, I guess, Rob,
That is
how is it that,
so ridiculous? I can't. It's like, I get what Habor's there for, is preserve a historic district and historical houses, but it seems like there's houses getting drawn into this that shouldn't be.
and I did want to address one thing. The idea of a harmonious and stuff like that, these are things that are in the town code already from the creation of Habor. These are not things that we're creating. The words harmonious and harmonized are things that is the job of Habor to do. And this was brought to us as an idea from Habor. It wasn't something that was like the brain. I worked with them to make edits to make it something that could conceivably be considered, as opposed to something that was like not working. But this whole thing exists already. And post 1918, building permits bring you in if you're post 1918, right? Right now.
There might be a misunderstanding as to this elimination of 1918.
Could you get to the mic?
reason for the elimination is not, it's very simple. Right now as it's written, if your home was constructed after 1918, you only have to go to Habor if whatever you're proposing requires a building permit.
So you do post 1918
So
in these areas have to go to Habor right now.
House, that does not require a building permit, so you don't have to go to historic board. You can
But
paint
you
any
do
color
have to
you
go
want,
for some things.
unless you need a building permit.
That's what I'm saying.
And painting your house does not require a building permit right now, post-1918. Pre-1918, right now, any exterior change, whether or not it requires a building permit, must go to Habor.
But
That's the law right now.
And then
But if you're outside of the historical areas,
Right.
you don't
You
need
never go.
you don't need a building permit, or you don't need to go to anyone to paint your house, right?
Correct, that's my understanding. Jane is here, but
No, you don't.
Right,
Yeah,
you don't.
We've been through that.
Educated guess is you definitely do not need a
I
building
don't
permit
know.
to paint your house. So now, there's some
So
members
do-
of the historic board are frustrated about this post-1918, we'll call exemption for non-building permit improvements like painting. They would like that to fill that hole where post-1918 structures and buildings and homes can change the exterior of the house because they don't require a building permit any way they want, including painting it pink. So this was intended to add a layer of regulation to preserve the historic areas. It wasn't to loosen it, it was actually
It's
to make
not,
it more
no
strict.
one's thinking it's to loosen
I think
it.
it's chokehold.
Some
that-
of the
no one
comments
here
tonight
thinks
may have
it's to loosen it.
misunderstood that of
It's-
eliminating 1918.
No, I think it's,
I
so
think
it's,
Do I need a mic?
the issue is that what I'm just trying to get at is that the problem, the technical problem here for the town that has a historical area board review and that has historical areas to consider if no one wants to deal with there's a distinction between 1918 pre and 1918 post, which is building permits. If your house was built in 1987 and you coming for building permit, you're into Pan, you have to go to Habor even if it's a contemporary from 1987.
Correct.
You still go in. You don't go in for painting, but you still have to go to historical area board review anyway. If you're pre-1918, you go in for basically anything. If you look funny at your house, you go in. That's the law as is.
Correct.
And then anyone from post-1918 who's come in the last like 30, 40 years, however long this has been going on, gets a rider on their decision or has had a rider put on their decision by Habor saying, if you do anything at all, you have to come in anyway, even though you're post-1918. So there's this third class of buildings of a 1987 contemporary comes in because they want to do an addition. They go to Habor, they get a decision that includes the requirement to come in for all future exterior changes. So now we have three groups which is completely disconnected.
That is correct.
And that, in my mind, is
But-
the bigger problem than, you
And
can
this
keep
law is not
1918 if
addressing
you
that
want.
issue.
It does, actually. It doesn't address, because everyone would then have to deal with it anyway. It fixes that.
I
by-
think the law should say if you're a 1987 high ranch, you shouldn't have to go to Hayward.
Could that be done? I mean,
I don't think you should have to. It's not a historical house.
I mean, that's what the code is now. Right now, it's what, so there's a gap there. No, you can't. No, it's not.
David Engler, who's the lawyer, wanted to protest about that because that particular wording at the end of the HABR approval was added in September of 2011, I think by the previous.
So it's more recent. I'm sorry, thank you for clarifying that, but
Yeah, and David, who's a lawyer, feels that, and I think I would have said it last time, it's not in the law, it was never approved as a part
Right.
of the law. It's just sort of was there.
Thank you.
But I wondered, if we wrote something up, could we send it to you to be part of your decisions?
well, I don't know. We're not making decisions on it, but.
No, I mean, I just,
Well, this
You
is
can-
not meant-
yes, I'd like to hear what
we
you
would
have
like
to
hear
say.
anything you want to submit, and maybe I'm gonna have to ask you to sit down though, because that's not how the public hearing works. No, can you go back to your seat, please? I really don't want to be rude. I want to show you as much respect as I can, but we just can't have people walking up randomly.
Let's.
The public hearing will remain open. We will not set a second date because we need to make revisions to
Or
it.
we can set.
Or we can set a date out in January or something like that. You know, we have a calendar
Close
now.
with no action at this time.
Close with no action
Because
at time.
we would have, you should
We could
notice
redo.
it.
All right, we're
notice
gonna
it.
close
Alright.
with no action.
Do I have a
So
motion?
why don't I just motion to close?
Motion to
with
close
further
with no
action.
further action.
From
If
Councilman
there's gonna be any
Divney.
further public hearing, it'll be noticed again, just like it was
Right,
tonight.
separately with.
All right.
Motion from
I
Councilman
concur.
Divney, second by Councilman Troy. All in favor?
All right.
All
thank
right,
you.
we've closed the public hearing. Thank you.
All right,
You
now we're
may-
going to public comment.
We now have general public comment, but I'll give you, let's take a 2-minute
A
recess.
2-minute
to-
recess.
Motion for a 2-minute recess from Councilman Divney, second by Councilman Troy. All in favor? Great. Please feel free to make as much noise on your way out if you do want to leave or stay, and we're going to take a brief pause. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move us out of recess.
Second.
Second by Councilman Divney. All in favor?
Motion to open public comment.
Hold on. We're missing a clerk.
All right.
We gotta wait.
No worries. You can open it.
Okay. Rosanna, you around?
Yep, I'm right here. All right, let's go. Open it up.
All right, I'm gonna assume that there'll be notes taken at the, on the YouTube version. Motion to open public comment by Councilman Divney. Second by
Dennis
Councilman Troy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hold on. Menu, yes, it does, actually. Hold on.
All right.
1, 3, enter. 3 minutes, enter. Okay. General public comment, any topic you like, you have 3 minutes. Please wind it up at the 3-minute mark to the sentence you're on. And no questions and answer sessions, no wielding of time. We will not go back and forth with you at the microphone. First sign in, we have Eileen Larkin. No one signed in ahead of you. You skipped 3 lines before you signed in, hoping someone would get ahead of you. And no one did. You deleted off.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Supervisor Day, for making the note about how to make a notice about streetlights being out. Now, we're having a fundraiser next Friday night at the center. We're having a fundraiser, and it's from 5 to 8. And the light across the street, which is right at the corner of the driveway for the school, I believe is still out.
Okay.
And that's important because it's very dark at that point. So maybe, who actually does replace the lights? An outside contractor or?
Yes, we have a contractor.
It's an outside
Albright
contractor.
Electric, yeah.
Oh, okay. They were all new LEDs, so why they're out, I don't know. So these days, I'm not picking on Republicans, I'm picking on Democrats. Dennis knows I sometimes pick on people, right? Okay. I'm picking on Amy Paulson tonight because she's pushing for legislation to mandate that all children 7th grade and up be vaccinated for the HPV virus. And you might say that the word mandate irks me. But she has pushing this in January. She'll be putting it before the assembly up in Albany. I called Senator Carlucci's office. Supposedly, he feels that the legislation is good. However, it should be on a voluntary basis, not on a mandated basis. Governor Cuomo, I think the headlines today, one of the papers, maybe the Post, said, you can't smoke a cigarette until you get 21. So that's another mandate, another law against the rights of people who want to smoke and get sick if they want. That's their right. But anyway, that's about it. And again, thank you for the lights. If they could possibly repair that one for next Friday night, because people will be walking to their cars at nighttime.
We'll follow up on it.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you.
Next, Esther Baitler of Spark Hill.
Good evening, Supervisor Day, Town Board members. Hi, my name is Esther Ann Baitler, and I'm a unique consumer who lives in Spark Hill. Tonight, I'm here to address all of you regarding the odors coming from Maloof. I was on the 92 bus going to the Palisades Mall to work for Salvation Army, and I smell the odors. It is disgusting. I really urge the board to deal with this issue. It is toxic, it is disgusting. People are dying of cancer in this community because of the bad odors, and I see that nothing's being done. So I'm asking you guys, please get on the bandwagon and deal with the issue. I would like to also invite you all to the Kathy Lukens Christmas party on December 14th from 12 to 4 in the afternoon. Again, thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? You were, thank you. Okay, seeing none, motion to close public comment from Councilman Divany. Is there a second from Councilman Troy? All in favor? All right. All right, we're moving back to the agenda items as presented. Councilman Troy, have you had a chance to look at the calendar, and does it meet with your approval? Okay.
All right.
Do we want to vote to adopt, we haven't heard back from Paul or Jerry.
Well, they can always make amendments.
They can make amendments in the future, so I think it's good to be able to start scheduling stuff if we need to,
Yep.
so, okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the 2020 Town Board meeting
Moved.
calendar? Second by Councilman Troy. That was a motion from Councilman Divany. All in favor? All right. Then we're skipping number 4. Skipping
Five,
number 5.
6,
Skipping number 6.
7.
Skipping number 7. Number 8, accept the grant funding. We voted on one of them already, but yes.
Yes. All right.
Sorry, I lost you
8.
there, Rob. All right, number 8, we're accepting $75,000 grant. There is no strings on this one other than them putting dimmers on some streetlights.
Moved.
Councilman, I'll give this one to Councilman Troy. He said it almost at the same time. Second by Councilman Divany. All in favor?
Sounds good.
All right. Next, we have a resolution to grant permission to attend Laserfish Empower Conference for our IT folks.
Long Beach, California?
Long Beach, California. They
All
said
right.
they said that. I wish
I
it was in
get
the
it.
worst place.
All right.
Because they're gonna notice it.
I'll vote on it, but usually it's like Ithaca, New York, but now it's Long Beach,
I
California.
warned them. They said, "You're sure it couldn't be in a worse part of they say California. I was like Sacramento, right? Like, no, Long Beach. Okay.
Exactly.
Making the motion from Councilman Troy, second by
Second.
Councilman Divany. All in favor?
All right.
All right. Next, we have a resolution to retain the TGKI law firm regarding opioid litigation. Motion by Councilman Divany,
Yep.
second by Councilman Troy. All in favor?
Well, it's gonna be either or tonight.
We're going to go back and forth now.
All right.
Resolution to approve settlement of claim for Structureless Construction, $5,100 and $5,105.
Moved.
Motion by Councilman, see, I said we're going to go every other one. You're going to
We'll see each other in
Councilman
Final
Divany,
Jeopardy.
second by Councilman Troy. All in favor? All right. He's got the slower reaction time. so fair.
Exactly.
Resolution to approve lend assistance for the Share Christmas event in Pearl River on Friday, December 6th. Motion by Councilman Troy, second by Councilman Divany. All in favor? Thank you for playing by the rules. Resolution to lend assistance for the annual Santa Claus 5K run at Veterans. Motion by Councilman Divany, second by Councilman Troy. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Resolution to lend assistance for the John Paulding Engine Company Fund Drive, which happened already. Councilman Troy,
All right.
second by Councilman Divany. All in favor? Resolution to change fees and other charges regarding road excavations, driveway, and heavy hauling. Councilman Divany with the motion, second by Councilman Troy. All in favor?
All right.
Resolution to amend Appendix of Town Code regarding Chapter 27, road excavations, driveways, and heavy hauling, as reflected. Motion by Councilman Troy, second by Councilman Divany. All in favor?
All right.
Resolution to change drop-off center fee for non-green waste materials. Is there a motion by Councilman Divany? Second
Right
by
here, buddy.
Councilman Troy. All in favor? It's a good system.
Exactly.
Resolution to approve New York State Agreement for OPD Participation in Police Services Grant Program. Motion by Councilman Troy, second by Councilman Divany. All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution to retain bond counsel as revised, adding $200,000 to the total and to the highway paving one. Is there a motion
Move.
by Councilman Divany, second by Councilman Troy? All in favor?
All right, Jeff, keep it quiet.
Audit for Jeffrey.
Yeah, while he's doing that, I wanted to do an amendment to a previous one.
Yes.
It was Resolution 623 regarding outside counsel.
Yes.
I just wanted to change, we had an amount in there, I spoke with Jeff, we're just gonna keep it the same, and regarding hiring the legal services, and take out the amounts, and just say upon review of the rules of town attorney's office and finance.
Okay, that's resolution number 623, 2019.
Yes, and I'll prepare something for Janice for tomorrow.
Is there a motion to amend resolution 623, 2019 as reflected by Rob Summary? Councilman Divany, second by Councilman Troy. All in favor?
All right. Jeff, you're up.
Jeff.
Okay. The audit for tonight's town board meeting consists of 4 warrants for a total of $1.4 million. The first warrant had 2 vouchers for $9,500 and was for a 207C payment. Second warrant had 40 vouchers for $869,000 and was for utilities. The third warrant had 1 voucher for $12,500 for a legal settlement. And the fourth warrant had 239 vouchers for $536,000. Items of interest: Applied Golf, $50,000 for the Blue Hill contract. Number 2, Capasso, $62,000 for recycling. Number 5, the CSEA Employee Benefit Fund, $30,000 for dental benefits. Number 6, Fleet Pump and Service, $16,000 for sewer repairs. Number 8, Global Montello, $32,000 for fuel. Number 10, JP Morgan Equipment Finance, $53,000 for the energy performance contract. Number 12, NIPA, $21,000 for the streetlights. Number 14, Sprague, $16,000 for fuel. And number 15, the comptroller, $50,000 for justice fines. Any questions on the audit?
Questions on the audit
Nope.
for Jeff?
Did you get 100%, Tom?
Yep.
All right.
Good at this. It's talent.
Moved on the audit.
Motion by Councilman Divney, second by Councilman Troy. All in favor?
All right.
Okay, we have executive session topics. We have at least one I know of for contracts. Right, but that's litigation contracts with the school district. Want to talk about a little bit?
Oh, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And then,
Okay, so we do have a memory, an adjournment in memory of Mr. Raymond Coyle, resident of Pearl River. What was he involved with?
Yeah, Coyle
Ray
Insurance.
Coyle Insurance. I had
Yes.
known Ray a long time. He was a member of the Provo Rotary Club
Rotary,
and
yes, sorry.
very active and very nice, great guy, and very sudden. I think he was 60 years old.
5 children.
Yeah, so his son, one of his children was recent West Point graduate, so.
All right. So I'm going to move that we enter executive session to discuss matters of litigation and contracts, and then immediately thereafter adjourn in memory of Raymond Coyle of Pearl River. Is there a second? Councilman Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time.